A window breaks on the 13th floor of a hotel in Manhattan at 2 in the morning in November of 1953.
A man falls to the sidewalk below. The police report will call it a suicide. His widow will raise 3 children believing it. For 22 years, that is the entire story anyone is allowed to know. Here is the question underneath it. What does it take to make a man who studies death for a living stop trusting his own mind about his own death?
Frank Olson is not a soldier and not a spy, not in the way the word usually means. He is a bacteriologist. He works at a U.S. Army biological warfare laboratory in Maryland, a place that will later be called Fort Detrick,
where the government studies exactly how efficiently a living organism can be turned into a weapon. Olson is good at his job. He is trusted with the parts of the job most people are never told exist.
In the middle of November 1953, he drives to a hunting cabin at Deep Creek, Lake, Maryland,
for a retreat with the small circle of men who run something called MKUltra, a CIA program built around one question: how far can you push the human mind before it breaks? And can you make someone break on command? Olson does not want to go.
He has started to have doubts about his own work, the interrogations he has witnessed, the direction the whole project is heading.
He goes anyway.
On the second night, a bottle of orange liqueur is poured for the group. 70 micrograms of LSD go into Olson's glass, a fraction too small to see, too small to taste. 20 minutes later, the room stops making sense.
Every man in it has just been dosed, without being told, by the colleague sitting across the table.
Olson does not recover from it the way the others do. That night, he tells his wife on the phone.
4 words. I made a terrible mistake. By Monday, he is trying to quit.
He tells his supervisor he wants out. The work, the things he has seen, all of it. And his supervisor tells him exactly what a frightened man wants to hear. You didn't make a mistake. Everything is fine. Stay. He does not get better on Tuesday. A coworker walks him home from the office before noon. Olson can no longer function through a workday. He tells his wife something has been arranged. Psychiatric treatment. That same afternoon, he boards a flight to New York.
With his supervisor and with Robert Lashbrook, the CIA chemist who mixed his drink days earlier.
Both now sitting beside him as escorts. In New York, Olson is handed to Dr. Harold Abramson, a physician who, years before any of this, had already worked alongside Olson himself on aerosol weapons research. The man now treating his breakdown is the same kind of colleague who caused it. Over 3 days, Abramson evaluates him and reaches a diagnosis, a profound psychotic break consistent with LSD poisoning. On the 4th day, Abramson makes a recommendation.
Send him home to Maryland to continue treatment closer to his family.
Olson calls his wife one more time. He tells her the good news. He is coming home.
He never leaves the hotel room.
9 days after the drink was poured. Hours after telling his wife he was finally coming back to her, Frank Olson is dead on a New York sidewalk.
His roommate that night is the same man who mixed his drink 9 days earlier, Robert Lashbrook. When police reach the room, they find him sitting on the closed toilet lid, head in his hands. His story is simple. He was asleep. He heard a noise. That is all he knows. But the hotel's night operator remembers something else. A call went out from that room to a doctor on Long Island. A physician with a quiet second reputation as one of the CIA's own LSD researchers.
She recalls a single line from the call.
Well, he's gone.
For the next 22 years, that is where the story stops. Suicide.
A man with a stressful job in over his head. Case closed. Then, in 1975, a government commission investigating the CIA's abuses turns up something nobody outside a small circle was ever supposed to see. Frank Olson had been drugged, without his knowledge or consent, 9 days before he died. His family is finding this out for the first time over 2 decades later from a government report. President Ford personally apologizes to the Olsons in the Oval Office. The CIA's own director apologizes. The government offers over $1 million to settle, before quietly bringing it down to $750,000. And internal White House papers, years later, will admit the quiet part. A real trial risked looking less like justice and more like the government paying to bury its own story. The family takes the settlement. It is the closest thing to an answer they will get for 19 more years. In 1994, Olson's son has his father's body exhumed, not to reopen a case, but simply to bury him beside his late mother. But while the coffin is open, the family arranges something the original 1953 autopsy never did. An independent forensic examination led by a professor of forensic science at George Washington University. What his team finds does not match a man who jumped through a window. There is a large hematoma on the left side of the skull, a serious injury to the chest. Fracture patterns that, in the lead examiner's judgment, look nothing like the damage of a 13-story fall. They look like trauma that happened before the fall, not because of it. His conclusion, in his own words: the evidence is rankly and starkly suggestive of homicide. Not suicide, not misadventure. Someone, the forensic record now suggests, may have hurt Frank Olson before he ever went through that window, and the fall was staged to explain what was already done. No one is ever charged. Manhattan's cold case prosecutors review the findings and decide there isn't enough to bring before a grand jury. The trail is by then 41 years cold. Here is the detail that makes this different from every other unsolved government mystery. 18 years after the exhumation, in 2012, Olson's sons take the government to federal court one more time. And they lose. The judge rules their claims are barred, waived by that old settlement decades ago. But the judge does not stop there. In his own written ruling, he adds something no one asked him to add. The skeptical reader, he writes, may wish to know that the public record supports many of the family's allegations, however far-fetched they may sound. A federal judge, dismissing the case on a technicality, effectively told the family, "You're probably right, and it will never matter in this courtroom." And there is one more piece, sitting quietly underneath everything else. In 1973, as the head of the CIA was about to lose his job in the fallout from an unrelated political scandal, he picked up the phone and gave one final order: destroy the MKUltra files. Sidney Gottlieb, the man who poured the liqueur at Deep Creek Lake 20 years earlier, spent an entire day with 3 colleagues, tearing and burning through more than 150 folders of records. Whatever proof once existed of what really happened to Frank Olson, in a room with his name on it, was very likely reduced to ash by the man who put him in that room in the first place. The program those files documented was not small. By the time investigators later pieced together what survived, MKUltra turned out to span at least 149 separate sub-projects, running through more than 80 institutions, universities, hospitals, prisons, with over 180 outside researchers involved, most of whom likely never knew which program was funding their work. Almost none of that paper trail exists anymore, by design. A handful of boxes survived only by accident, misfiled, overlooked, found years later by a records clerk processing an unrelated request. Everything else the institution wanted gone is simply gone. Not covered up in the dramatic sense, just erased calmly by the people whose job it was to be trusted with it. Which brings us back to the 4 words Frank Olson said to his wife the night everything changed. "I made a terrible mistake." He was right. And the person whose job it was to reassure him talked him out of listening to himself. That is the part of this story that has nothing to do with the CIA or LSD or 1953. Because most of us at some point have felt that same instinct, the quiet, specific certainty that something is wrong.
Followed almost immediately by someone we trust, telling us we're overreacting. Don't worry about it. You're fine. Stay.
Frank Olson trusted the people who told him to stay. 9 days later, he went through a window. We will likely never have a courtroom verdict on what really happened in that room. But we already have a federal judge's own words on the record, admitting the official story was never the whole one.
The next time your own instincts tell you something is wrong, and someone you trust tells you it isn't, that is the moment this story is actually about.